Welcome to Unit 5 of Introduction to Psychology, where we'll be focusing on the theories of development with specific reference to lifespan development. One of the major areas of research that psychology finds very interesting is examining the different ways in which the human being develops through time. What is it that is expected or considered normal? What are the different markers? What are the things that we use to indicate abnormality or arrested development or advancement? How is it that we have come to discover and realize that this child is advanced by their age versus this is typical behavior for a teenager? Let's first off define development. And development is a pattern of continuity and change in human capabilities that occurs throughout life, involving both growth and decline. These changes occur on three different levels: the physical, the cognitive, and the socio-emotional. And for the purpose of this course and this unit, we'll be discussing the different main theories that speak to these different aspects of development. The first person that we'll speak to, or the first theorist, is that of Erickson, and he's a psychosocial development. He created a theory of psychosocial development. Erickson maintained that personality develops in a predetermined order through 8 stages of psychosocial development, from infancy to adulthood. During each stage, the person experiences a psychosocial crisis, which could have a positive or negative outcome for personality development. For Erickson, these crises that he refers to are of a psychosocial nature because they involve psychological needs of the individual and conflicting with the needs of society. So according to his theory, successful completion of each stage results in a healthy personality and the acquisition of basic virtues. Basic virtues are characteristic strengths which the ego can use to resolve subsequent crises. Failure to successfully complete a stage can result in a reduced ability to complete further stages and therefore a more unhealthy personality and sense of self. These stages, however, can be resolved successfully at a later time. So just to highlight here, Erickson specifies that there are 8 stages of psychosocial development where a person is faced with an individual internal crisis because they're trying to meet their individual needs but also to satisfy the expectations of society. And when that conflict arises, he refers to it as a crisis. Now, if you handle this crisis in a healthy way, you will develop a stable personality. However, if you do not, you will develop certain issues that can have the potential to resolve. However, the longer they stay unresolved, the more difficult you'll face when facing the later stages of psychosocial development. As I said before, there are 8 major stages and they're restricted to a particular age range. And I'll be discussing each of these stages. The first one is that of trust versus mistrust, and this occurs from birth to the first year of life. Now, a sense of trust develops if the infant has warm, responsive care. They therefore develop a sense of trust or confidence that the world is good. So if they have loving caretakers that meet their needs, that anticipate, keep them well fed, and let them feel secure, they generally develop a sense of trust towards others. However, mistrust can occur when infants have to wait too long for comfort and are handled harshly. And of course, I'm sure there are persons that can look back on their lives and relate to say, okay, this is probably why I generally don't trust others. Because from the very beginning, perhaps my mother had to leave me to go to work from very early. And so I was left with, persons who didn't necessarily care for me in a loving way. Stage 2 speaks to autonomy versus shame and doubt. And this occurs between the first 3 years of life. At this stage, you're using new mental and motor skills. Children want to choose and decide for themselves things like what they want to eat, what they wear. And a sense of autonomy is fostered when parents permit reasonable free choice and doesn't force or shame the child. So, for example, in this stage, a child may want to wear choose what they want to wear to church, for example. Now, when we say we permit reasonable free choice, you can say, do you want to wear the pink dress or the purple dress? As opposed to telling the child, what do you want to wear? And when the child picks out a bathing suit to wear to church, you're beating them and letting them feel shameful and doubtful about their decisions, right? So when they are shamed for the different initiatives that they take, trying to develop this sense of autonomy, they can have lasting feelings of shame and doubt if this is not handled carefully. The third stage is that of initiative versus guilt, and this is from 3 to 6 years. Through make-believe play, children explore the kind of person they want to become. Initiative is a sense of ambition and responsibility, and it develops when parents allow their child a new sense of purpose. When parents demand too much self-control, guilt develops. So during this time, they're developing potty training skills, they are learning imaginative play, and just simply facilitating their play games to say they're giving you an imaginary cup of tea and you drink it and say, oh, it's so delicious. That develops their sense of initiative and allows them to be able to speak for themselves, for them to not be afraid to ask for help and that kind of thing. However, if when they are doing their make-believe play and you run them and tell them you don't have time for them and that kind of thing, they can develop a sense of guilt to say, maybe I shouldn't have gone there, maybe I shouldn't have gone this far. And so that sense of guilt can develop and possibly linger. The fourth stage is a very interesting one, and it's industry versus inferiority. And this happens between 6 to 11 years. Now, as you know, on a social level, at the age of 6 to 11 years, this is when you're starting school, you're establishing relationships outside of the family structure, and they develop the capacity to work and cooperate with others. Now, when they are rewarded for their good work, that's why the whole system of getting a star every time you get all your spellings correct works for them, because they develop a sense of industry. They feel that they're contributing to the class and that they're doing well. Inferiority develops when a negative experience at home, school, or with peers lead to feelings of incompetence. So this is when teasing can become very impactful. Right? You have inferiority complex and superiority complex. Now, inferiority complex is when you are of the impression that no matter what you do, there will always be persons better than you. And so you have a sense of self-defeat, so you don't even want to try. You say, oh, I'm not good in math. So you develop an inferiority complex. A superiority complex is when an individual does a lot of stuff in order to overcompensate for that feeling of inferiority. So, for example, the person may feel inept in mathematics, so they try and do their above and beyond best in English and literature so that you don't notice that they're not so good in the mathematics, right? The fifth stage is industry identity versus role confusion, and this occurs during the puberty stage. The adolescent tries to answer the question, who am I? What is my place in society? By exploring values, the young person forms a personal identity. So this is a stage where you will find teenagers will want to try different hairstyles, different styles of dress, try their luck with different types of friends and personalities. And similarly for their career, this is when you introduce various subjects to them to see what their areas of interest are. And the negative outcome is confusion about adult roles, and they can develop something called an identity crisis, wherein they're not sure what they want to be, they don't know what type of person they are busy following everybody else and have no sense of self. And this is the stage where there's a lot of rebellion and confusion because they're teenagers, they're children, they're treated like children, they look like adults, and they're trying to figure out their role and place in society. This is also a stage where there's a bit of a transition period between the adolescent and the parent, because now they need to have more responsibility, or they want to have more say, and the parents are saying, you're still a child, you still don't know everything. The next stage is that of intimacy versus isolation, and this occurs in early adulthood. Young adults work on establishing intimate ties to others. And because of earlier disappointments, some individuals form close relationships and others remain isolated. So when we talk about the previous stages and the different crises that may occur, mistrust, shame and doubt, guilt, all of these different things, if those crises linger into early adulthood, these can be the barriers that prevent you from establishing intimate, healthy relationships. So if you mistrust your partner, there is source of conflict there. If there's a sense of guilt or you lack initiative, you will tend to be submissive and second-guessing things. If you have feelings of inferiority, you may not want to take the initiative to establish a relationship, or you find yourself in a very submissive or receive abuse in these situations. So you can end up remaining very isolated. And when we talk about intimacy, it's not just about looking to marriage and establishing a family, but also maintaining and establishing healthy friendships, relationships, work relationships, and so on, and just generally getting along with others in a positive way. The next stage is generativity versus stagnation, and this speaks to the middle adulthood stage. Middle-aged adults contribute to the next generation through child rearing, caring for other people, or productive work. Now, the person who fails in these ways, the absence of meaningful accomplishment and stuff, feels stagnant. So this is where the famous phrase midlife crisis comes from. This is usually the age range where persons will say that by the time I'm 40, I should have a house, a car, I should be establishing my career, I should have children, I should be married. And when you get to this stage and you realize that you haven't accomplished these goals that you set for yourself, you can feel very stagnant, wherein you find yourself saying, I'm in the same job that I've been in the last 10 years. I said I wanted to finish this degree, I never got there, different things like that. However, if you find that you are living the dream, you're establishing and reaching your goals, or you're well on your path to getting there, you will feel generative and you feel like a contributing member of society, and there's a lot of level of satisfaction and contentment with that. The final stage occurs in late adulthood, and it speaks to ego integrity versus despair, and is following from middle adulthood, where elders reflect on the kind of person they have been. Integrity results from feeling that life was worth living as it happened. You look back at the children you have raised or the career you've had, and you're, looking closer to death, not to sound morbid, and you look back and you say, okay, I feel good about the life that I have lived, and I have minimal regrets, and I feel good. There's a lot of integrity that comes with aging. However, those who are dissatisfied with their lives fear death. And this is something that, they tend to see with despair. And this is where you'll find a lot of old persons tend to be very miserable for no apparent reason. They're anticipating death a lot and, as it says, despair. The next developmental theorist that we'll look into is a French psychologist known as Jean Paget, and he was mostly interested in cognitive development. How does the mindset change, or the way of thinking and problem solving change throughout the years from birth into adulthood? Now, Paget's theory of cognitive development explains how a child constructs a mental model of the world. He disagreed with the idea that intelligence was a fixed trait and regarded cognitive development as a process which occurs due to biological maturation and interaction with the environment. So he was very much a balance when it came to the nature versus nurture argument, and he was the first psychologist to make a systematic study of cognitive development. His contributions include a stage theory of child cognitive development, detailed observational studies of cognition in children, and a series of simple but ingenious tests to reveal different cognitive abilities. And it is his tools that we still use today in psychology. What Paget wanted to do was not to measure how well children could count, spell, or solve problems as a way of grading their intelligence. What he was more interested in was the way in which fundamental concepts, like the very idea of number, time, quantity, and so on, emerged. How is it that we acquire knowledge throughout the years?